The observation deck of the Krillian. Battle cruiser Titan's heeled hummed with the usual pre-shift banter. I stood there, all 7 feet of reinforced exoskeleton and military pride, watching the newest batch of recruits filter into the training bay below. My name is Vorin, Senior Combat Instructor for the Galactic Defense Coalition, and I had seen thousands of species pass through these halls over my 32 cycles of service, but nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for what was about to unfold. Instructor Vorin, my assistant Quillax, chirped, his 4 eyes blinking in that nervous pattern he always displayed when delivering news he knew I wouldn't like. The human delegation has arrived. I felt my mandibles click in irritation. Humans, the newest species to join the coalition, and boy were they making waves, not the good kind either. See, humans had this reputation. They talked big, claimed their home world was some kind of death trap that made them naturally superior warriors, and generally acted like they owned every station they walked onto. The problem, their physical stats were laughable. I had reviewed their biological assessments personally. Average strength compared to other species, bottom 15%. Natural armor 0, built-in weapons none, speed mediocre at best. The only thing remotely impressive about humans was their endurance, and even that seemed more like stubbornness than actual capability. Send them in, I growled, watching through the transparent floor as the training bay prepared for the afternoon combat assessments. The doors hissed open, and in walked 3 humans, 2 males and 1 female, all wearing the standard issue coalition recruit uniforms that looked comically oversized on their small frames. Male stood maybe 59, 5'10". The female was even shorter, couldn't have been more than 54. Instructor Vorin, the taller male, extended his hand in that bizarre human greeting ritual. I'm Marcus Webb. This is David Torres and Ella Park. I looked at the extended appendage like he was offering me a disease specimen. After an awkward moment, he withdrew it, and I caught the slight smirk on his face. Great, a comedian. You 3 are late, I said flatly, even though they weren't. The combat assessment begins in 10 minutes. You'll be evaluated against standard coalition recruits from various species, failed to demonstrate adequate combat capability, and you'll be reassigned to support roles. Am I clear? Crystal, Marcus said, and I caught David elbowing him in the ribs. The female Ella said nothing. She just stared at me with these dark eyes that seemed to catalog every detail. Something about her gaze made my spine ridges prickle, though I couldn't explain why. She was tiny, probably weighed less than my right arm, and looked like a stiff breeze would knock her over. Down in the training bay, the other recruits were already assembled. I spotted Growl, a Thorsian heavy worlder whose species had gravity 3 times Earth standard. His muscles had muscles, and his exoskeleton could shrug off small arms. Fire, there was Celix, a draconid with reflexes so fast she could snatch flies from the air, and Coraro, a Vendorian whose species had been warriors for 10,000 years before humans even discovered fire. This was going to be embarrassing. All right, recruits, I activated the baywide comm system as we descended to the main floor. Today's assessment is simple, hand-to-hand combat evaluation. You'll face off against an opponent of similar size class. Victory conditions are simple: first to yield, first to be incapacitated, or first to be removed from the combat. Circle loses, medical teams are standing by, so don't hold back. I watched the human trio as I explained the rules. Marcus was doing some kind of stretching routine, rolling his shoulders and neck in a way that looked like it should break bones, but apparently didn't. David was breathing deeply, some kind of meditation technique maybe, and Ella, she was watching the other recruits with that same intense focus, her face completely neutral. First match, I announced, consulting my data pad, Grok versus Marcus Webb. A collective murmur rippled through the assembled recruits. Grok was enormous, even by Thorsian standards, standing 8 feet tall and probably weighing close to 600 lb. He grinned, showing rows of granite grinding teeth. Marcus walked into the combat circle like he was heading to a casual lunch meeting. His posture was relaxed, hands loose at his sides, and that insufferable smirk still on his face. Nothing personal, human, Growl grumbled, his voice like an avalanche. But your species doesn't belong in combat roles. Better you learn that now than in actual battle. Appreciate the concern, big guy, Marcus replied, rolling his shoulders one more time, but I think we'll be okay. Quillix leaned close to me. Shouldn't we stop this? Gro could kill him with one punch. Medical team is ready, I said coldly. Besides, humans wanted to be treated like every other species. They're about to get their wish. I activated the timer. Begin. Growl didn't waste time. He charged forward with surprising speed for something his size, drawing back one massive fist for a blow that would probably have caved in a shuttle door. Marcus didn't run, didn't dodge, didn't do any of the sensible things a smaller opponent should do. Instead, he stepped in. I almost missed it. The movement was so fast. One moment Grok was throwing a punch that should have ended the fight instantly. The next, Marcus had moved inside his reach, rotated his whole body, and driven his elbow into the nerve cluster just below GR's armpit. The Thorsian's arm went dead instantly. Grok roared in surprise more than pain, swinging his other arm in a wild backhand that should have sent the human flying. Marcus ducked under it so smoothly it looked choreographed, then did something that made my combat trained brain stutter. He jumped, not just a jump. The human launched himself upward using Growl's bent leg as a springboard, got both hands on the Thorsian's thick neck, and before anyone could process what was happening, Marcus had rotated his entire body weight and used the momentum to throw Grok off balance. All 600 lb of heavy world muscle crashed to the mat with a boom that shook the bay. Marcus rode him down, had some kind of joint lock applied to Grok's good arm before the Thorsian could recover, and said in a perfectly conversational tone, "Ye." Silence in the training bay was absolute. Grok, to his credit, tested the hold once, realized his arm was about 2 lb of pressure from snapping, and tapped the mat twice. I yield. Marcus released him immediately, helped the massive warrior to his feet, and walked back to his side of the circle, while Growl stared at him like he'd just witnessed physics malfunction. Lucky shot, someone muttered. I think it was Koro. Next match, I said, my voice tight. Celix versus David. Tors, the Draconid female, slithered into the circle, her scaled body reflecting the bay lights. She was a striker I knew, trained in her species. traditional combat art that emphasized speed and precision over power against a slow, weak human. This would be over in seconds. David entered the circle and I noticed his breathing had changed. Deeper, more controlled. His stance was different from Marcus too, more grounded, hands up in a guard position. Try to keep up soft skin, Celix hissed, and launched herself forward. She was fast, incredibly fast. Her species could process visual information at 3 times the rate of most humanoids, meaning she effectively perceived the world in slow motion compared to her opponents. Her first strike was a blur. Aimed at David's throat, he moved his head exactly 3 into the left. The second strike came immediately after. Combination that should have been impossible to defend against. David's forearms came up, deflecting one strike, absorbing another, and then his hand shot out and grabbed Celix's extended wrist. What happened next was biomechanics in action. David didn't try to match Celix's speed. Instead, he used her momentum, pulled her slightly off balance, and drove a perfectly placed knee into her midsection. The air left Celix's lungs in a whoosh. Her speed meant nothing if she couldn't breathe. David didn't let up, transitioning smoothly into a throw that sent the Dronid tumbling across the mat. She tried to recover, coiling for another strike, but David was already there, one foot placed precisely on her tail to pin her down, his hands in position to strike vital areas. Yeah, he asked quietly. Celix stared up at him, her reptilian eyes wide with shock. She tapped out 2 for 2. The muttering among the recruits had turned from mockery to confusion. Quillix looked at me, all 4 eyes wide with questions. I didn't have answers. For final match, I announced, and I could hear the edge in my own voice. Koro versus Ella Park. This was where it would end. I told myself Koro was a prodigy, trained since childhood in Vendorian combat techniques that had conquered half their star sector. He was fast, strong, technical, and mean, and his opponent Ella stepped into the circle, and I noticed something that made my blood run cold. She wasn't nervous, wasn't excited, wasn't even particularly focused. She looked bored. Koro at least had the sense to look concerned after watching his fellow recruits get dismantled. He entered the circle cautiously, his forearms held in a defensive formation that had no obvious openings. Ella spoke for the first time, her voice clear and completely casual. You guys have been talking a lot about how weak humans are. Kororo said nothing, watching her for any telegraph of attack. Bottom 15% strength, I heard. Ella continued, starting to circle. No natural weapons. Fragile, basically made of tissue paper. And optimism. I saw Marcus grin from the sideline. The thing is, Ella said, and her posture shifted so subtly I almost missed it. You're measuring the wrong things. Koro struck first, a probing jab with his upper right arm, fast, technical, designed to gauge her reaction time. Ella didn't block or dodge. She slapped it aside with her left hand, the motion so casual it looked insulting. The Vendorian's eyes narrowed. He threw a real combination. This time, all 4 arms working in concert, a pattern that had won him a dozen championships on his home world. Ella moved through it like water, her body position changing just enough to make each strike miss by fractions of an inch. And then when Koro was fully committed to the combination, she punched him. One punch. It wasn't fancy, wasn't some exotic technique or pressure point strike, just a straight right hand, thrown with her full body weight behind it, all of her legs, core, and shoulder. Rotating into the strike, the sound was wrong. That's the only way I can describe it. Metal shouldn't make that sound. Kororo's armor plating the same stuff that could take a glancing blow from a plasma rifle, cracked with a sound like breaking ice. The Vandorian flew backward, crashed into the edge of the combat circle, and didn't get up. Ella lowered her hand, examined her knuckles, which were red but unbroken, and walked calmly out of the circle. Training bay was silent except for the medical team rushing to Kororo, who was conscious but clearly stunned, staring at the spiderweb crack in his chest. Armor like it was a personal betrayal. I don't understand, Quillix whispered beside me. The biological assessments, the strength measurement, they should be top 1% to do that, and she's smaller than either of the males. I watched Ella rejoin Marcus and David, saw the casual fist bump they exchanged, and felt something I hadn't experienced in my 32 cycles as a combat instructor. Uncertainty. Because here's the thing about humans that I was beginning to understand. They didn't have natural armor, so they invented material science and built armor better than anything biology produced. They didn't have natural weapons, so they turned every part of their body into one. They weren't the strongest, so they learned leverage, momentum, and technique to multiply what strength they had. And apparently their females were just as dangerous as their males, which was a concept that several warrior species were going to have trouble wrapping their heads around. Instructor Vorin, Marcus called out, that grin still on his face. Did we pass? I looked at the three humans, then at Koro being helped to his feet by the medical team, then at Growl and Celix, who were watching the humans with new respect and more than a little fear. Class dismissed, I said flatly, except you three. We need to talk. As the other recruits filed out, casting backward glances at the humans, I descended to the combat circle. Up close I could see that all three were breathing harder than they'd appeared, their skin flushed with exertion. They weren't invincible, just extremely, terrifyingly well trained. Where did you learn to fight like that? I demanded. Earth, David said simply. We've been doing this for thousands of years. Your species is constantly at war. Marcus laughed. No, we just really like punching each other, and we got really good at it. I stared at the three humans standing before me, trying to reconcile what I had just witnessed with everything I thought I knew about combat, efficiency, and biological advantage. My training protocols had been developed over centuries, refined through actual warfare across dozens of star systems. And yet these soft-skinned primates had just dismantled three of my best recruits like it was a casual afternoon exercise. Thousands of years, I repeated slowly. You've been perfecting unarmed combat for thousands of years. Why? Ella shrugged, finally showing some expression beyond that unnerving calm. Sport, self-defense, philosophy, religion, entertainment, take your pick. Different cultures had different reasons, but the result was the same. We got good at hurting each other without weapons. Your species fights for entertainment, Quillix asked, his translator barely keeping up with his shocked chirping. Oh yeah, Marcus said, we pack stadiums with thousands of people who pay money just to watch two people try to knock each other unconscious. It's wildly popular, has been for centuries. I felt my mandibles clicking. Rapidly, a sign of deep confusion among my kind, but your biological assessments indicated average strength at best. How did that female crack reinforced Vendorian armor with a single strike? Ella, the human in question, said, I have a name. How did you crack the armor? I corrected, irritation creeping into my voice. She held up her hand, flexing the fingers. The knuckles were swollen and already starting to bruise in spectacular colors. Physics. Force equals mass times acceleration. I might not have much mass compared to your heavy worlders, but I can generate a lot of acceleration. Plus technique matters. I didn't just throw my fist at him. I threw my entire body, used my legs to drive upward, rotated my hips and core, and delivered all that kinetic energy into a surface area about the size of 3 square centimeters. She hits like a freight transport, David added helpfully. Always has made varsity boxing team when she was 15 standard years old. Varsity, Hillix asked. School. Competition level, Ella explained. Earth has organized combat sports at every level: children, adolescents, adults, amateur, professional, multiple disciplines: striking arts, grappling arts, weapons arts. Some cultures practice these from age 4 or 5. My spine ridges were standing fully erect now, a defensive posture I couldn't control. You train your children to fight. We train our children to defend themselves. Marcus corrected. Big difference though. Yeah, some of us also do it competitively. I started wrestling when I was 6. David did karate at 7. Ella was a boxer and kickboxer. Wrestling, karate, boxing, kickboxing. I repeated the unfamiliar terms. These are different combat systems, different approaches to the same problem, David said. How to defeat another person using your body. Some focus on striking, some on grappling, some on weapons. Most modern fighters learn multiple systems. We call it mixed martial arts. I pulled up my data pad, already composing a priority message to Coalition Command. This changed everything, every tactical assessment, every combat projection, every assumption about human capabilities in ground warfare needed immediate revision. The other species need to know about this, I said. Your combat capability has been severely underestimated. Has it though? Ella asked. In that bored expression was back, or did everyone just look at our biology and assume that's all we were? The question hung in the air like a live grenade. She was right, of course. We had taken one look at human physical specs and dismissed them, never bothered to ask about their training, their techniques, their thousands of years of refined violence. The Thorns won't like this, Quillick muttered. They've built their entire military doctrine around being the dominant heavy infantry force. They'll adapt, I said, though I wasn't entirely sure I believed it. The question is, what else haven't we been told about human capabilities? The 3 humans exchanged glances, and I caught something in their expressions that made my blood run cold. Amusement. They were amused. Well, Marcus said slowly, drawing out the word. There's the pain tolerance thing. Pain tolerance. Humans can keep fighting through injuries that would incapacitate most species, David explained. Our bodies produce natural chemical compounds that suppress pain and enhance performance. During stress, adrenaline, endorphins, cortisol, we can literally ignore broken bones, torn muscles, even some organ damage if the situation requires it. That's impossible, Quillix squeaked. Pain is a survival mechanism, overriding. It would be evolutionarily disadvantageous. You'd think so, Ellis said, but Earth is really good at creating situations where fighting through pain is the difference between survival and death, so we evolved to do it. There are documented cases of humans fighting off predators with multiple broken limbs or continuing combat operations with wounds that should have rendered them unconscious. I thought about the implications. An enemy that doesn't stop when injured, that can continue fighting even when by all logic they should be down. The Krillian invasion of the Vandor home world had succeeded primarily because Vandorians, for all their skill, would withdraw when sufficiently damaged. It was sensible, logical, survival-oriented behavior. Humans apparently didn't have that sensibility. How many humans are in the coalition military now? I asked, though I already knew the answer would upset me. Current enrollment is about 5,000 across all branches, Marcus said, but Earth just approved a new recruitment initiative. We're expecting that number to hit 50,000 within the next cycle. 50,000. 50,000 creatures that could punch through armor, ignore pain, and had spent millennia perfecting the art of personal combat. And they were all going to need training integration with coalition forces. We're going to need to completely restructure our tactical doctrine, I said, more to myself than to them. Or, Ella said, and I didn't like the tone in her voice. You could let us show you what we can really do. Meaning that little demonstration was just basic hand-toned. Marcus said, you want to see what humans are actually good at? Put us in a real combat scenario, small unit tactics, asymmetric warfare, close quarters battle. That's where we shine. You want a live fire exercise? I felt my mandibles clicking. Again, you've been in coalition space for less than 3 planetary rotations. You don't know our equipment, our protocols, our command structure. So teach us, David said simply. Give us a scenario, standard coalition gear, and see what happens. What do you have to lose? My pride, I thought, my reputation as the finest combat instructor in the coalition, my deeply held belief that biological advantage determined combat effectiveness. Just those small things. Fine, I said, making a decision I would probably regret tomorrow. 600 hours, live fire combat scenario, you 3 against a standard coalition fire team, 6 opponents, mixed species, all combat rated. Victory conditions are objective: capture and hold, stun rounds only, but they'll hurt like the real thing. Lose, and humans get reassigned to support roles across the board. Win, I paused, trying to think of stakes that mattered. Win, and you get to help redesign coalition close quarters combat training. Ella finished, because honestly, what we saw today was pretty weak. No offense. Much offense taken, I growled. 600. Don't be late. They left and I stood in the empty training bay looking at the cracked section of floor where Koro had landed, the scuff marks from Grolk's impact, the slight indentation. Celix had been thrown 3 matches, 3 victories, and they hadn't even looked particularly challenged. Instructor Quile said quietly, what if they win tomorrow? Then we learn, I said, and we adapt, or we die. That's how evolution works. Next morning arrived too quickly. I had spent most of the night reviewing footage of the matches, analyzing the human movement patterns, trying to Identify weaknesses or predictable behaviors. I found none, or rather I found dozens. But each apparent weakness turned out to be a setup for something else. Feints. Within feints, drawing opponents into overcommitting before exploiting that opening. It was sophisticated combat theory that should have taken years of experience to master. The humans moved like they had been fighting together for their entire lives. The scenario bay was already configured when I arrived. Urban environment, 3-story structure with multiple entry points, civilians to avoid hitting, and a central objective marked by a pulsing beacon. Standard hostage rescue setup, one of the most challenging scenarios we ran. The opposing team was already assembled. I had chosen carefully 2 Dreenids for speed and precision, 2 Thorsians for power and durability, 1 Krillian for tactical leadership, and 1 Zirian for their natural camouflage abilities. This wasn't a team of recruits. These were fully trained coalition soldiers with actual combat experience. The humans arrived exactly at 600, already equipped with standard coalition combat gear that looked comically oversized on their frames. Marcus was checking his stun rifle with the ease of someone who had handled weapons before. David was adjusting his armor plates. Ella was doing some kind of breathing exercise, eyes closed. Rules are simple, I announced over the baywide comm. Capture the objective and hold it for 5 minutes. Stun rounds only. Civilian casualties will result in immediate point deductions. Friendly fire is tracked and penalized. First team to complete the objective wins. Medical teams are standing by for stun recovery. I watched both teams take their positions. The coalition team moved with practice efficiency, setting up overlapping fields of fire, designating sectors, establishing communication protocols. Professional textbook. Perfect. The humans huddled together briefly, had a conversation too quiet for the pickups to catch, and then split up. No obvious formation, no standard tactical positioning. They just scattered into the environment like they were making it up as they went. This is already a disaster. While muttered beside me, begin scenario. I announced and activated the timer. The coalition team moved immediately, advancing in a disciplined wedge formation toward the objective building. The Zalarian vanished, camouflage active, presumably moving to scout. Ahead, the Krillian was calling movement orders, rotating team members to cover angles. For the first 2 minutes nothing happened. The coalition team cleared the ground floor methodically, encountered no resistance, and began ascending to the second level where the objective was located. That's when reality shattered. The Zalarian scream came first, his camouflage flickering offline as something hit him from behind. The stun round impact signature showed he had been struck 3 times in rapid succession from 3 different angles. Impossible unless they split up, I said, understanding dawning. Each human is operating independently. The coalition team tried to adapt, forming a defensive perimeter, but they humans were already inside their decision loop. A stun round came through a window, taking down 1 Thorsian. Another came from above somehow, dropping a Draconid. Marcus appeared on the 3rd floor, visible on our monitors, drawing fire from the remaining coalition members. He ducked back into cover, and I realized too late it was a distraction. While they were focused on him, David had flanked around and was now behind their position. His stun rifle spoke 4 times in 2 seconds, 4 targets down. That left only the Krillian team leader, who was now alone trying to reach the objective while under fire from 3 directions. Credit to him, he almost made it. But Ella was already at the objective, had been there the whole time, apparently waiting. 1 stun round. Center mass, the Krillian dropped. Total engagement time 4 minutes 17 seconds. The scenario ended, medical teams rushing in to help the stunned soldiers recover. I stood frozen, trying to process what I had just witnessed. It wasn't just that the humans had won, it was how they won. They had anticipated every move, exploited every gap, operated with a coordination that shouldn't have been possible without communication equipment that I knew they weren't using. Replay, I demanded, and Quillix pulled up the tactical feed. There, in the initial huddle before the scenario began, the humans had planned the entire engagement in less than 30 seconds. Assigned roles, designated timing, established coordination points, and then they had executed it flawlessly. How did they know the coalition team would advance in wedge formation? Quillix asked. Because it's standard doctrine, I said slowly. They studied our tactics, identified the patterns, and built a counter strategy that exploited our predictability. Down in the scenario bay, the humans were helping the stunned coalition soldiers to their feet, offering water and those strange gesture rituals they did. The Krillian team leader was staring at Ella with something approaching respect. I need to file a report, I said. Command needs to know that every tactical assumption we've made about ground combat may be wrong. What will you tell them? I thought about the question for a long moment, watching the humans interact with the other soldiers. They weren't gloating, weren't celebrating their victory, just treating it like another training day, already analyzing what they could have done better. I'll tell them the truth, I said. Finally, that we've been measuring the wrong things. We looked at biology and Miss Psychology. We counted muscle fibers and ignored millennia of refined violence. We assumed physical advantage, determined combat effectiveness, and forgot that intelligence, adaptability, and sheer stubborn refusal to lose might matter more. And the restructuring of close quarters combat training. I pulled up a new file on my data pad, began drafting the course revision proposal. Ella was right. What we've been teaching is weak. We've relied on biological advantages for so long that we've forgotten that skill, technique, and tactical thinking can overcome raw physical power. These humans are going to teach us how to actually fight. Quillix's 4 eyes blinked in that pattern. That meant he was uncertain. The other species won't accept being trained by humans. They'll see it as an insult. Then they'll lose, I said flatly. And in actual combat, losing means dying. Better their pride gets hurt now than their families get extinction notices later. I descended to the scenario bay where the humans were packing up their gear. All 3 looked tired now, the adrenaline wearing off, revealing the actual physical cost of what they had just done. They weren't superhuman after all, just highly trained and incredibly determined. Congratulations, I said, and the word tasted strange in my mouth. You've proven your point. Effective immediately. You 3 are assigned to combat training development. You'll work with me to redesign our close quarters battle curriculum. Marcus grinned. Does this mean we passed? You exceeded every metric I had prepared, I admitted, which is simultaneously impressive and deeply irritating. Report tomorrow at 800 and bring documentation on these martial art systems of yours, all of them might take a while, David said. Earth has developed hundreds of distinct combat systems over the centuries. Hundreds at least: boxing, wrestling, karate, judo, jiu-jitsu, muay thai, taekwondo, krav maga, wing chun, savate, and that's just the major ones. Most human cultures develop their own approach to personal combat. My spine ridges were aching from being held erect for so long. Start with the most effective ones. We'll expand from there, Ella spoke up, her voice thoughtful. You know what the real lesson here is, instructor? Enlighten me. Everyone in the galaxy seems to think that strength is about how hard you can hit or how much you can lift, she said, but humans learned a long time ago that real strength is about how much punishment you can take and keep moving forward. It's about adapting when your plan fails. It's about finding a way to win when every logical analysis says you should lose. She smiled, and it was the first genuine emotion I had seen from her. We're not the strongest species, we're not the fastest or the most durable, but we're really, really good at refusing to quit. And in a long enough fight, that matters more than anything else. I thought about her words as the humans left the bay, about Earth, that death world that had somehow produced a species that turned disadvantage into weapon and weakness into victory condition, about the fact that humans had spent thousands of years fighting each other, not because they had to, but because they wanted to get better at it. The galaxy had just gained 50,000 new soldiers who could punch through armor, fight through injuries that should kill them, and adapt to any tactical situation with terrifying speed, and that number was going to keep growing. Quillix, I said, send a priority message to all coalition training facilities. Title it Reassessment of Human Combat Capabilities and Market Urgent. What should the message say? I looked at the cracked floor panel where Ella's opponent had landed, thought about the 3 human victories I had witnessed, and felt something I hadn't experienced in my entire military career. Anticipation. Tell them, I said slowly, that humans may look weak on paper, but appearances are deceiving. Tell them that we've been underestimating a species that has spent its entire evolutionary history learning how to win fights they shouldn't survive, and tell them that if they want to learn what actual combat effectiveness looks like, they should watch very carefully when a human walks onto the training mat. I paused, then added, because when a human throws a punch, armor cracks, and when a human decides they're going to win, biology becomes irrelevant. Quillix finished typing and looked up at me. Anything else? Yes, I said, feeling my mandibles click in what might have been amusement. Tell them that the humans are going to teach us how to really fight, and we're going to learn, or we're going to be left behind. As I watched the message send propagating across the coalition communication network to every training facility, every combat unit, every military commander who had made the same mistake I realized something profound. The galaxy had spent millennia developing warfare based on biological advantage. The strong conquered the weak, the durable outlasted the fragile. The naturally armed dominated the defenseless. Humans had developed warfare based on something else. entirely on technique adaptation and the absolute refusal to accept that biology determined destiny. They had looked at their physical limitations and said, so what, we'll find another way. And they had, tomorrow the real work would begin teaching coalition forces that muscle mass wasn't destiny, that armor could be defeated by technique, that a smaller opponent with better training could defeat a larger one with better genetics. It was going to be difficult, frustrating, and would challenge centuries of military doctrine. I found myself looking forward to it because when a human girl who barely weighed 100 lb could crack reinforced armor with a single punch, everything you thought you knew about combat was wrong, and maybe, just maybe, that meant everything you could learn about combat was just beginning. The humans had arrived in the galaxy, expecting to be underestimated. They had been right, but they had also been ready to prove everyone wrong, one cracked piece of armor at a time, and now the entire coalition was going to learn what Earth had known for thousands of years, that the will to win matters more than the ability to dominate, that technique beats strength, that adaptation beats specialization, and that when you mock the human punch because it looks weak, you better hope you're not the one standing in the combat circle when they decide to prove you song.